Hello everyone, my name is Nassim and I'm with Masterworks Photography, and today we're going to discuss a very important topic, which is how to clean your camera sensor. We get a lot of questions from our readers about how to do this, and I know that most people are scared to do this. Some even professional photographers take their cameras to Sony, Nikon, or Canon professional services for them to clean the sensor. Today I want to show you how you can do this at home yourself without any external help. So we're going to separate the video tutorial into three parts. The first part is identifying the sensor dust. The second part is actually cleaning the sensor. And the third part is post-maintenance or post-cleanup and maintenance. So let's get started with identifying sensor dust. I'm sure you've been out in a situation where, or outdoors or just anywhere where you took a picture with a blue sky and you see dark spots in the picture. Those are typically the sensor dust, and it's very annoying because it will show up in the same spot every time. And it's very different from the sensor, or from the sensor dust is very different from the dust that you typically get on the front of the lens. The dust that you get on the front of the lens never shows up in the image like that. If the lens is very dusty, you might get kind of a cloudy or less contrasty image, but it's not going to show up in the actual picture. What shows up is the sensor dust. So how do we get it identified and cleaned? So as I said, just by looking at the picture you can identify the dust. Or the second thing you can do, if you don't know whether you have it or not, is do a quick test. This quick test involves any white area. You can use any white surface, a white wall, white ceiling, white paper, just really anything that's white. Sometimes another good way is to really change on your monitor of your computer, change the background to white and take a picture. That works as well. So the way we do this is, in my hands I'm holding a D700 professional full frame camera. The full frame cameras are a little bit tougher to clean because the sensor area is bigger, much larger than the cropped sensor. So, but you still have to, the process is still the same. So it doesn't matter which camera you use this on. So on a D700, I have this 50mm f1.4 lens, and the largest aperture on this is 1.4, and the smallest aperture is f16. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the lens to the smallest aperture. The smallest, so to do that, I changed the camera mode to aperture priority by just pressing the mode button, switching it over to A mode. On the Canons it's a little bit different, you might do it through the dial. So just through the dial, change it over to AV mode, and then once you do that, rotate the front dial. On the Nikons, on Canons, you have to rotate, I think it was the rear dial or maybe the front, I don't remember, but just make sure that you set it to the largest f number, which is the smallest aperture. On this lens it's f16, so I rotate this, set it to f16. Once I do that, I have to go into menu, and what I need to do is set up my ISO to the lowest ISO number and make sure that auto ISO is turned off. So I do this by going to menu, and then it's under the shooting menu, and it's called ISO sensitivity settings. So I set the ISO sensitivity to 200, and I make sure to turn auto ISO off. Why? Because we need to shoot it at the lowest ISO in order to be able to see those dust spots in the image. If your ISO is very high, you might get a lot of grain, which will be mixed up with the dust, which we don't want. So after you set it to your base ISO, on most of the Nikons it's ISO 200, at least on the most current Nikons. On the Canons it's going to be typically ISO 100. Set your lens, if you're using a zoom lens, just zoom in all the way. So if you're using a 24-70mm lens, just zoom into 70mm. If you're using the new 28-300, zoom into 300mm. It doesn't matter what the focal length is. Once you're zoomed in all the way, all you have to do is just take a picture. And the reason why I'm doing this with my hands is because I don't want to get any shadows or features that might be on this piece of paper. So if you do this on the wall, just move the camera around. Doesn't really matter. The image doesn't have to be in focus. All we're looking for is dust. And the dust will come out when you shoot at the largest f number or the smallest aperture. So after we take the picture, we're going to end up with a white image like this. What you need to do is zoom in to about maybe 75 to 100% and just go from left to right, from top to bottom, and look for anything that looks dark gray or just black. So anything that you see that's going to look like a circle or might be a piece of hair, could be anything really on your sensor. Whatever you see on there is going to be on your sensor. So that's how we identify the dust. If you don't see anything when you do this and everything looks clean, then you're in good shape. But going forward in the future, you might encounter dust on your sensor, and if it hasn't happened yet, it will definitely happen to you. Just the nature of DSLRs and how they work. So this is just a good way to identify it. Like I said earlier, there are multiple ways to do it. One good way is to change the background in your desktop on your PC to a white color, and do the same thing. Instead of using white paper, the monitor is brighter, so you're probably going to get, instead of several seconds, you might get half a second or less. So whatever way works for you, doesn't really matter. As long as the image is out of focus and you're shooting at the largest f number, you will see the dust that's sitting on your sensor. So that's how we identify it. Now let's talk about how we clean it. There are many different ways to do this, but one method that's very easy, that you can certainly do yourself without any external help or without consulting anybody, is to blow it out with air, use a sensor brush, or do wet cleaning. So all those three are very easy, and you can do that yourself. The first thing that I recommend to do when you clean the sensor is, well, make sure first that the battery is fully charged. If the battery is not fully charged, most of the cameras won't even let you raise the mirror up, which then gives you access to the sensor. So in this case, after you made sure that the battery is fully charged, simply go into the camera menu, and you're going to see under setup menu, lock mirror up for cleaning. So just go into that lock mirror up for cleaning. On the Canon, it's probably going to say something different, like mirror up or something. Whatever the language is, it's basically the same thing. So it says when shutter release button is pressed, the mirror lifts and shutter opens. So I do this, and that's what raised up the shutter. But I'm going to turn the camera off because I need to dismount the lens first. So let's do that. I typically recommend dismounting the lens by holding the camera down. By doing this, you reduce the amount of dust that might potentially end up on your sensor. So if you're outside shooting with multiple lenses and you want to change the lens, I've seen some photographers do it like this, where they'll just take the lens out straight, and the camera will be pointing up like this. There might be dust everywhere. Then they look for their lens in their bag, and then they mount it. Not a good idea. By holding the camera like this, whatever dust is on the air settles down. It will settle down on the mirror, and then will end up on your sensor. So whenever you change lenses, keep your camera pointed down. Okay. So I removed the lens, and one more thing to keep in mind: do this in a dust-free environment. I typically do this after kids go to sleep, whatever, 10, 11 p.m. at night in a bathroom. That's a perfect room for me because it's very clean most of the time, at least. And with the dust, you have to be careful, because whatever dust is around you, whenever you open up the camera and you dismount the lens, the chamber is open to all kinds of dust. So just make sure you do this in a dust-free environment. Once again, after you dismount the lens, the first thing that I would recommend before you even touch the sensor is to clean this area around the lens mount. the lens mount itself will get dirty from just mounting and dismounting the lenses. It's pretty natural, happens every time. I've been using lenses and cameras. I clean them almost every other day whenever we go out shooting, and even if I clean it thoroughly, in 2 or 3 days after changing lenses, I will get dirt on it, which is pretty normal. So what I do is just take microfiber cloth and then use one of these. I have this Eclipse optic cleaning system. Really, any optic cleaning solution will work. This is great for lenses, but also works for just cleaning the lens mount. So what I do is just take that and apply a couple of drops, and I'll just clean around. Okay, and as you can see, after cleaning it several times, I still get dirt on it, which is quite normal. So once you get that cleaned, the second thing I do is I point the camera down. Now this is with the mirror still down. Okay, I have not touched the mirror yet. Point the camera down, then you take this Giotto's blower, and this rocket blower is like $15, and I would recommend everyone to get it. It's really cheap and it works great, better than using air cans or anything like that. So just use this, point the camera down, and what you want to do is clean the bottom piece of the camera. Okay, that's where most of the stuff that falls off from the lenses or from other places might end up. It's not really inside the chamber yet, it's just right behind this lens mount. Okay, so point the camera, tilt the camera at about 45 degrees. So when you blow the air, whatever particles you might have, you want them to fall down, not go back inside the camera. Okay, so and obviously anything small might end up being inside the camera, which is fine, because I'll show you how to clean that as well. So once you do that, the next thing we're going to do now after this is we're going to lock the mirror up, and as you can see, the mirror just went up and you can see the sensor right now. We're going to take the blower. That's the first thing that I highly recommend to do. Is if there's any sensor dust you see on the sensor, this will probably work 50% of the time, maybe more. In the beginning, it works 90% of the time. So all you do is again hold the camera with the lens mount down, then you take the blower and you do this. Okay, do it for whatever 30 seconds or more. Just make sure that you blow all the way around, and whatever is inside, you want to make sure that it falls down here. Okay, now if you have a lot of dust inside, doing this might actually cause the dust to settle on the sensor, which is again normal. You're just gonna have to deal with it. You're just gonna have to learn how to clean it. So once we do this, we take the lens back and we mount it, and we do the same thing we did earlier, which is to use a piece of white paper or whatever white area and take another picture, just the way that I showed you. When you do that, we're just checking if whatever dust we saw there earlier is now gone. If you see more dust, bad news. If you don't see any dust, good news, that means you cleaned it. Now, what do you do if there's more dust inside? Let me dismount it back again. And what I did just a second ago was I mounted the lens while the mirror was still up. I would recommend to turn the camera off, let the mirror down, and then mount and dismount lenses. It's just safer that way, but either way works, but it would still be safer to do it with the mirror down. So what do we do if this didn't work? The second method is to use a fine brush. And these brushes you can buy from B&H, from Adorama, from wherever.